Hello and welcome out to this episode of the Tax Sale Titans podcast. We're so happy to be back. We took a hiatus for a little while we were working on the website, and we are back and ready to do more episodes and do more videos.
Yeah, exactly. And what we think we're going to do is we're going to be releasing the videos each Monday. So each Monday you can plan on a new episode of Tax Sale Titans where we go over tax sale investing. We go through a number of different segments and talk about tax liens and tax deeds.
Yeah, so to start with, let's just do a quick shout out to all of our coaching members and our program members, and as well as even our YouTube members and our subscribers, because ultimately, that's who we do all of this for. And it kind of starts with our subscribers, and actually, I guess it starts originally with people probably finding us on YouTube, and then eventually, they become subscribers and work their way up from there. And so it's really because of all of them that we do this.
Yeah, absolutely. So we want to thank each one of you guys uh, from our coaching members, like Shade said, all the way to our subscribers. We appreciate y'all.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Now, also, we enjoy getting questions on some of the different platforms we have, and sometimes we'll take those questions and we can use that to do additional videos where we can just go through and answer questions, in those. And so, we appreciate any comment or feedback that you leave us on those videos, and we will see if we can also make additional videos answering those questions.
Yeah, Shade makes a good point with the comments. In fact, we're going to be going through and we know we've missed some of the comments and questions you guys have. We're going to go through and try to answer any of those questions here that we have on YouTube. Then we're also going to get not only me and Shade, but also some of our coaches to come on YouTube as well and start answering questions we want, and in Facebook and some of the other platforms that we use.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, in addition to that, for some more news and announcements, one of the things that we have going now very strong are 3-day workshops. We have 3-day workshops that are taking place all the time. Almost every single week, we are in I guess we have a team that's out in a different city, and is spending 3 full days going through so much different content, so much more time than we get over the course of just a regular webinar. So these are some of the locations that we will be at here, over the next, we could say, I guess month and a half or so.
Yeah. Well, it looks like we've got Atlanta has already finished up, but we're going to be in Orlando, then Dallas, Los Angeles, and Houston. So if you'd like to come out and attend, let us know. As far as attending the 3 days, it's $499, or if you're a member, it's only $299. So it may be a benefit if you do want to become attend to go ahead and sign up for the membership. You can get that discount.
Yeah. Now, for the topic this week, we want to talk about tax deed risks and some of the risks that are associated with buying our favorite stuff, which is land. It isn't without its risks. There are risks that are there. It's important to recognize exactly what those risks are, and then also how we can avoid, how we can avoid them and how we can avoid making mistakes.
Yeah, well, if you followed any of me and Shade's trainings before, we always talk about tax sales or tax sale properties having two things, having number one use and also having value. And so when we're talking about tax deed land, it needs to have a use, especially if it's going to be a buildable property, residential property, even commercial property. It needs to be a buildable property. And so one of the major risks that people can have in buying property or buying land in particular is buying land that isn't usable because it doesn't fit within the zoning requirements of that city.
Yeah, easily one of the biggest risks that we always face with land is, some of the best opportunities we're going to find will be with land in tax sales. But the flip side of that is that the biggest risk that we face is useless land. And so there is, and sometimes it's hard to tell the difference from looking just at the outside whether land is going to be useless or whether land is going to be a good investment. And so, there are certain things that we can check and that we need to check. Anytime we're looking at potentially buying property. In fact, we do these buying tours on a regular basis, and every time we do a buying tour, uh, you know, we need to check all of these different things in order to determine that land is usable. That it's not a useless piece of land. And so, we're going to talk about how we can determine that. And I guess it goes into greater depth than just comparing it to the lots around it, because sometimes that's not enough. Zoning things can change over time, and so we want a definitive answer on things on whether property is usable or not. And so this is how we're gonna help you find it.
Yeah, well, in looking at it, the minimum lot size is really going to be the minimum amount of square footage or size that's required to be able to be built, or to be able to build on that area. And so that's usually going to be set by the city's codes or the town's codes. If it's located in more in a rural area or within the country, then the county, then it could be the county that we need to go to. But if we're looking at a property that's located in the city or a town, it's usually the town that we're going to need to go to find out exactly what that minimum lot size is.
Yeah, every single small local government has its own set of laws and ordinances. Basically, they cover everything, including what property can be used for, and essentially, what property can be used for, and then things that you can do with property beyond that. And so, um, yeah, it's important to understand, I guess, who exactly has jurisdiction over the property when it comes to something like zoning. Because in other words, if you're looking for zoning stuff under the county and the property, is within a city, you're not going to find the answers that you're looking for because you're looking in the wrong place. You need to be able to look, first find the right jurisdiction, and then, you can start to look for the correct zoning information.
Yeah, and as we're looking at an overhead map of the property on the county GIS maps, we'll look at the size of the surrounding lots to at least give us an idea, but we can't assume that because the lot next to it has a home on it, that this lot is still buildable, because laws could have changed when that property was initially built.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is something that laws, ordinances change all the time. They're passed with a simple vote. They can change with a simple vote, and so we need definitive information about the property. And so, yeah, in fact, sometimes it's a challenge trying to figure out exactly where the property falls under. But usually we can determine that when we're looking at at the assessed record on the property, and we're looking at, for instance, its address, where it's located at. Sometimes it's included in the address. Sometimes it's not. We have to dig a little bit deeper to figure out which jurisdiction it's going to be within. And if we get lost, one of the easiest ways to find out is just to call up the city, or the county, to find out. In fact, if there's any question about which jurisdiction it falls under, then that's the kind of question that they can answer pretty well.
Yeah, and I would say more often than not, the property is going to be located within some type of city or township or something like that. And so usually it's going to be this city jurisdiction, but that's not always the case. There is going to be county land, and so that case we're going to need to contact the county. And like Shade mentioned, we can always contact the city and find out exactly from them. They're really going to be a great resource that we use, not only in our own investing when we teaching our coaching students, or even like Shade talked about, when we go out on our buying tours with our students, where we attend one of these auctions. We're going to be going through that same process of contacting the city to find out additional information.
Yeah, in fact, we have to first figure out which jurisdiction, I guess, which municipality or which government entity has jurisdiction over the property. But once we know that, then we can begin to look for the actual zoning ordinances, or for the laws and how it's written out. And so, um, you know, in fact, what we're going to look at here is what you'll find on in most cases here when you're dealing with these, and that is, there's generally a village or a city or a town website where they'll have information, maybe some information listed about zoning, or a place where you can do stuff with zoning. But then there is a directory, a code directory that's completely separate, and that is where you're going to find specific answers. That's kind of like the laws, and as they're written, versus the county website, that's there to answer questions. So we can find some answers on the website, but a lot of times, though, where we're going to find specific answers will be in the actual directory.
Yeah, and a lot of times we're going to pull up both of them when we're doing a Google search. So in this case, you can see that we were looking up, an area in Pine Bluff, Arkansas. So we type Pine Bluff, Arkansas zoning lot size, but we can use a number of different keywords, as you can see over there on the left-hand side, whether that's building lot code or minimum lot size, district code. Any combination of these with zoning should be able to pull up information not only connected to the city website, but also, like Shade talked about, any of those directory codes that directories that have all of the codes available, kind of like the example here.
Yeah, in fact, so this, if you had clicked on the city website, that's what this pulls up here. So for Pine Bluff, this is their page on zoning, and we can actually look and see there is a link there to a zoning map that helps us see how the city is broken down and what areas. And sometimes we can find our answers there with the zoning map, by locating our property there on the map and seeing how it's zoned there. But this is also where you do things like filing for a zoning appeal, or if you wanted to try to get the property rezoned, this is where you would apply for that. And so there are uses here for this. But if we're trying to figure out exactly what how many square footage, or what the minimum square footage is for R1 residential, then what we need there are the actual, the book of ordinances, or the code, so that we can read what that definition is.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and here's kind of an example of the Code of Philadelphia. In fact, we were doing a training a couple of weeks ago with some of our advanced members, and we were looking at a bunch of different maps like this and determining where the properties were located based on these color code maps. Because if we're looking at a map like this, each one of those colors are going to be connected to a code, whether that be R1 or R2, or C1 for commercial, whatever their codes are within that district. We can use these maps to determine where the property is located, and then from the map determine exactly what the code is going to be located for that, the code for that particular property.
Yeah, zoning maps can be helpful in that way. Something else that is interesting that you'll find sometimes with zoning maps is this. This was actually on the Pine Bluff, Arkansas zoning map, which is a black and white map, but it still has them broken down into areas. It just doesn't quite look as nice. But down, up in the corners, they have these areas here, which there's one on the top and one there on the bottom. But what you'll notice here is they have the name, they have the number of the ordinance listed there, the date adopted, and who it was changed by. And they have to list those because, again, the laws are constantly changing over time, and that's why you could have a lot that may have been deemed usable when the lot was developed, or when the land was developed, 25 years ago, or 30 years ago, or 50 years ago, whatever it was. It's why you can have a lot that was usable at that time, but suddenly it's no longer usable, and it's because they changed the ordinances there at some point, and changed what that definition was.
Yeah, I mean, Shade really brings up a good point, because we've seen that happen where, in fact, I was looking at somewhere just recently where the code had changed in 2018. And so a property that was usable in 2018, they had changed the code to where it was no longer usable. And if we would have noticed that additional addendum and be able to go look at that, we could have easily purchased that lot, or recommended the student to purchase the lot that, had that type of code issue against it, or the code change, I guess I should say.
Yeah, absolutely. So the other option that we were talking about, one of them was the city or town website, and zoning information there. But the other one was the actual code of, or uh, the library, essentially. And so in this case, if we're looking at the at the library, uh, we can see here that Chapter 29 is what's dedicated to zoning. And so, it helps to find and know exactly where that's at. And sometimes we can determine that in part of the search, tell us there what chapter. But from inside the chapter, though, we can see that there are a number of different articles here. And what we're looking for, first they have district generally, which, and then district regulations, and that's kind of what we're looking for, is district regulations, which are going to tell us what the regulations are for each one of these districts. And that's also where we can see how they break down their classifications, or the different zoning, different zonings that they have.
Yeah, well, and as you can see over there on the far left-hand corner, you can see the different chapters there. So there's when we're pulling up these codes, we can be we're pulling up the entire code for all of the city laws. So within there, you'll have things, as you can see, administration and aviation, animals, buildings. In this case, what we're really looking for, like Shade said, is that zoning information. Once we've zoned in, once we found that zoning section or zoning ordinance section, then from there we're looking, like Shade said, for that district regulation and the district zoning map, because those are going to coordinate together.
Yeah, so here, we can see the district regulations, and this gives us a full breakdown here of what each one of their zoning classifications are. So we can see, and this is something also, by the way, that this varies from town to town, city to city. It's not, nothing about this is universal, and so um, you know, in most cases, maybe it's R1 for residential, but not everywhere. Sometimes they use different stuff. Most of the time, though, R1 is considered residential, but commercial isn't always called commercial. Commercial sometimes is called business in some places. Like I think in here it's called business is basically what they B, and they also have industrial. But then they break it down from light industrial to heavy industrial. Uh, you know, and then you've got also recreational areas you can see down there, and agricultural down there at the very bottom. And so again, you're going to have property types here that will cover every type of property within the county.
Yeah, and these codes are going to go ahead and match up with that zoning map that we were looking at earlier. So, even that one per Pine Bluff, this same area was a black and white, but there we're going to have those same code listings, and we're going to have to, like Shade said, go to the individual cities, because these codes can change quite a bit. Now, once we get, once we've looked at the zoning map, then we're going to try to look at those different district regulations. So in this case, we can see that this is R1 residential, and we can see a couple of things about it. We can see that it can use single family homes, but we also see what's most important, and what we're looking for is the buildable size. And so with this property, it needs to have a 60-foot width at the building line, and it needs to be at least 7,200 square feet.
Yeah, which so if 60 feet wide and 7,200 square feet, which is not very big. That's maybe what is that? Maybe 0.15 of an acre, roughly. I'm guessing here, um, but a relatively easy number to come up with too, if we're not sure exactly what it is, um, just by multiplying that length by the width. So let's take a look now. That may be so. For instance, if our property was zoned as R1, then that may give us the answer right there that we need. So as long as it's 60 feet wide, and is 7,200 square feet, then it meets that minimum requirement and it will be considered usable. But that's not always the case. Sometimes there are additional things that we need to consider, or there's additional requirements. Um, the main point is being able to find exactly what those requirements are, so that we know if the property we're looking at is going to meet them or not. In this case, it's nice to have specific numbers, like to know it has to be at least this width and it has to be this number of square feet. And aside from that, most properties will work.
Yeah, exactly. So with an R1 property, if it was 7,200 feet, and at least to have a 60-foot width or 60-foot frontage, would be okay to go. Now on R2 property, we can see that that's changed a little bit. And this, we actually can have a buildable lot if it has a 50-foot width and only a 5,000 square foot area. So with R2, we even have more flexibility, or we can even have a smaller lot and be able to build on it. But if the property was zoned, R1, if it was this size, if it was 5,000 feet, but it was in an R1 area, we couldn't build on it. But if it is an R2 in this size, then you could build on it.
Yeah, you'll also notice that the number of potential uses begins to change as properties, as the numbers change. You'll see different uses and different property types that that can be included here, and they generally go down in requirement because they're moving towards more of I don't know what you would call it, but more. Uh, well, more flexibility, but also housing that is more condensed. What is it? So, rather than needing quite so much space, you're talking more about things like condos and things like apartment setups, where again, they don't need to have quite the same requirement because they allow for different types of buildings as well. And that's what we start to see as the codes change.
Well, and that can make a big difference if we're buying a larger piece of land. If we're just buying a small lot that's within an area, then we can get a good idea of within a neighborhood, we can figure out, okay, is this buildable or not? But as we're looking at bigger pieces of land, that's where some of those other uses can actually bring up the value of the property. Now here, I think we're looking at is this R4? Yeah, R4. So we've gone down a little bit more, but here it even has a smaller amount with a 40-foot width and a 4,800 square foot use.
Yeah, in fact, yeah, we can see how the requirements are shrinking, as it goes up here in scale. Also, one of the things that changes, so here it's only being 40 feet, which is not that much, and 4,800 square feet, which is fairly small. We're talking about a tenth of an acre or so. But also this in R4, it allows for modular homes, or manufactured homes as well, which is something that it wasn't allowed if it was an R1 or R2 or R3. So it takes an R4 in order to be able to put a manufactured or modular home there.
Yeah, that's going to be an important thing to look at. In fact, mobile homes, we love buying mobile home lots, or lots that are mobile home friendly or allow mobile homes, because you'll find a lot of people that are looking to be able to buy a lot and put their mobile home, their modular home, their manufactured home, whatever it is, on that lot. But zoning can be pretty picky about it in some of these cities, and they won't allow it except for within a certain area. So, when these lots do come available, we pick them up, especially ones that may have already had a mobile home there before, because those could essentially be improved, where maybe they have already got utilities there, some form of utility, maybe a septic tank or hooked to the sewer, whatever it is. If they've already had a home there, mobile home there, and maybe have moved off, well, at least we know that they had utilities there at the lot.
Oh yeah, there's a significant investment, in order to take a lot from being just a basic vacant lot to making it, to getting it set up for a mobile home. I mean, Steve mentioned one of the things there, a septic system. In some cases, there are some areas where properties will have access to a sewer from the city, but in a lot of cases, with these properties, they don't. And so, there's requirements for something like a septic system, or even if they have sewer, it's a matter of getting it connected, which is a big expense all by itself. But then it's also things like getting the electrical out there and water. A person can spend quite a bit of money to get all of that set up. And so if we can buy a lot like that, it's had a pretty big investment into it. I mean, you can imagine somebody putting $20,000 into the lot to improve it. It's that kind of money that we're talking about. And so anytime, even if there's nothing there, even if there is no trailer there, but it was set up for a trailer at one point, that has tremendous value because somebody put a lot of money into it.
Yeah, well, and you could flip it and resell it to somebody who wants to put their trailer on it, or you could look at buying a manufactured home, whether it be used or new, and put that on the property, and suddenly now you're essentially selling a structured property, a usable property, or you could also use it as a rental. So that could be a great way to start earning rental income by putting a some type of manufactured home on that lot, getting it all hooked up, and then renting it out, where you've essentially were able to pick up the land for probably pretty dirt cheap. And so really your cost is going to be, or probably more majority of the cost will be in getting that mobile home to the lot. But then you've got automatically got a structured property that could bring as much rental income as trying to build a whole house, but with very minimal cost.
Yeah, not only that, but we're also talking about the lowest price of entry level housing, which is always going to be easy to sell. I mean, when you're dealing with the most inexpensive housing, there's always going to be a line of buyers, that want to pick it up from you. You'll never have a problem moving property. When it comes to stuff that's at the lower end of the price spectrum, and that's what mobile homes represent. They're the entry point there for housing, and so yeah, they are the perfect type of lot to go after. Now, um, the main points here is that generally we can, I guess, when we're looking at lots, uh, value and use tend to go hand in hand. So most of the time, if a property has good value associated with it, if the county gives it a good high value, it's because the property has use. And so, that use tends to follow the value. But sometimes you'll come across a lot and the county has a very low value attached to it. And that also follows use, because a lot of times that means that the property is not big enough to be used. And therefore, it's going to have some value attached to it, but it may be very small value, reflecting its inability to be used for anything. And so we can usually point out, these types of properties usually stick out to us, but it's important that we identify them ahead of time so that we don't buy something, with the expectation that it's usable, only to find out later that it's not.
Yeah, well, it's amazing how many times we see not our students, but at auctions that we're attending, at auctions with our students, that are investors are buying property that we know is not usable, we know is not buildable, because we've gone through that extra research, through those extra steps to make sure that we know exactly what is usable and what isn't. Even with us going out almost every single month with our students attending an auction, we're going through this process with them where when you attend that auction or you're bidding online, you really have a good idea of what is usable or not, so you don't make mistakes, because we see people make mistakes all the time. In fact, I think even later in today's episode, we're going to look at a couple of bad deals, and those were lots that were essentially not usable, and that can just completely affect it. You've essentially thrown your money away.
Yeah, 100%. And if you've made the mistake of buying the property, it's too late to do anything about it to fix it. In most cases, it would be like like overpaying for something. You're not going to be able to reverse that or somehow flip it around. And if it doesn't really have any use, you're going to have a tough time selling it. And so, um, yeah, it's an important topic. Now, uh, in terms of trainings that we have here and free offers, if you haven't been to secretsoftaxlieninvesting.com to download the ebook, that's something we definitely want everybody to go and do. It's not going to cost you anything, and there's a lot of content in it.
Yeah, in fact, we're in the process right now of actually rebuilding Secrets of Tax Lien Investing, so that should be out within a couple of weeks, which you'll have even a different look, and we're going to be able to add more things to it. So we're pretty excited about that. So if you're interested, go ahead and go to Secrets. We're also going to be offering free webinars there as well. So it's a great place to get some free training. But what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and do the deal of the week.
Yeah, we're gonna take a look at some deal of the week properties here, and we're gonna go online to do that. And so, what we're gonna do here Let's just exit out of this so we can hop online here. All right, so we're going to start here on the website, and we are in the online auction. We're in the online auction section, and from here we're in the online tax lien auction section here. So we're going to scroll down into Colorado here.
Yeah, well, Colorado has their auctions taking place right now, and there's still time to get registered for a lot of them. And so it's probably a good time to go through and talk a little bit about Colorado, how they work, because there's always going to be important things to know when looking at any of these tax lien auctions, because the rules are going to be different from state to state.
Yeah, that is a good point. And it can be pretty dramatically different with tax liens. It's important to understand the rules so you understand exactly, how you're making the interest, what you're making the interest on. There's a lot of information, how exactly the foreclosure works, what roll-up you've got to worry about or not worry about. But a good place to begin with an auction like this is just right here under like the bidding rules or auction rules. That's going to be a great place to start because you'll get a lot of questions answered here that include information like, for instance, what the requirements are in order to participate in the sale, and important stuff like that. Like in this case, it looks like they have a 10% deposit required um, in order to participate.
Yeah, and it looks like that we've got up until 10:30 to deposit it. So there's still time to participate in this auction. They're also going to require you to send in an IRS W-9 form because they're going to have to report the interest you've earned to the IRS. So there will be that involved. When we're looking at the bidding information, um, we can see a number of different things that are interesting as well. The minimum starting bid for each tax lien is equal to the amount of unpaid taxes, interest, penalties, and fees. And then the bid is going to increase by $1. So if we're looking at $1,000 tax lien, then whoever would bid, $1,001 would be the first bidder.
Yeah, something else that's kind of interesting that we can see is under the bidding, we can see the premiums on winning bids are a cost of securing the tax lien and are not returned, nor do they draw interest. That's important to know too. So, they have a premium, that they use to establish a high bidder, but it's important on, whatever premium you're paying there, it's not going to get, it's not going to get returned, and you don't earn interest on it either. They consider it a cost of securing the tax lien. So, that's another important thing to understand about these particular auctions.
Yeah, I mean, Shade brings up a good point. That is incredibly important to understand because in some areas, you may get that premium back. If the property ends up redeeming, the owner will have to go ahead and pay that premium. And so investors will, even if they may not earn interest on that premium, they still are going to bid knowing that they're going to get that premium back. Here in Colorado, you're not going to get that premium back, which means that you're going to need to keep that in mind when you're bidding on these properties because you wouldn't want a premium bid, thousands and thousands of dollars over the cost because you're not going to be winning any money if we're looking at $1,000 tax lien.
Another thing that's interesting here is under interest, you can see when redeemed, your certificate will pay 9 points over the Federal Reserve. Certificates will earn 15% for the current year's sale, except for erroneous sales, which will receive 2 points above the discount rate, but no lower than 8%. So it looks like certificates are going to earn 15% this year.
Yeah, yeah, that is a pretty good rate, especially the federal discount rate has gone up quite a bit, which has helped that go higher. Also it says that underneath, um, you know, yes, sorry, thank you, taxes, that you can have the opportunity to pay them, and they'll be essentially endorsed into your lien, and you'll accrue the same interest as your certificate. And so that's something also people are looking at when they're bidding on tax lien certificates is, okay, I'm going to get that 15%. And if they end up, going delinquent the second year and the third year, I can go ahead and pay those taxes off, and it'll be increased into my tax lien. So, and then I can be earning interest off of those additional second and third year as well.
Something else that's interesting is if there are subsequent taxes, they're going to give you the chance to, to buy them, and basically add them, to the liens that you've got. And for a lot of investors, that makes sense because if you did get the chance to foreclose on them, you would end up paying them off anyway. And so for a lot of investors, they are interested in trying to get any subsequent liens that come up. And so that's something that's good to know. It also tells us if the property is in a bankruptcy, subsequent taxes cannot be endorsed. Really, and we've talked about bankruptcies before, where that's just them basically saying if a bankruptcy comes up, then we may not be able to continue to do it. Doesn't mean though that you're gonna somehow not get your money back. You'll still get your money back.
Yeah, and underneath the treasurer's deed, we can see some additional information. It says a majority of tax liens are redeemed, which of course is true. But it says a treasurer's deed may be applied for 3 years after the date of sale if the tax liens remain undeed. A deposit is required to cover expenses. And so what this tells us is this county is a self-executing county where you're going to have to contact them and also pay a deposit to cover the expenses, but the county will actually be the one doing and issuing the deed on the property. You won't need to contact a lawyer outside of it.
Yeah, it's nice to have them handle the foreclosure like that, so that you don't have to hire it out. But again, though, you are going to have to pay for, the cost to foreclose, which is going to include any other, taxes that are owed on that property. Interesting though, right below that section, it says tax liens expire and are canceled after 15 years if they remain unredeemed. A 15-year life cycle, though, for a tax lien is a pretty good long time. And what that also tells us is that there is the potential in Colorado for 15 years worth of roll-up, potentially. Or in other words, you could have 15 years worth of tax liens because tax liens are usually issued once a year. It basically means though that you could have up to 15 years worth of tax liens against a property, and that can amount to a very large amount if you're dealing with just a delinquent amount that's constantly accruing interest. Then that can be a pretty big amount. So it means that roll up is something we'll want to watch out for.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, within 15 years, I think that's probably the longest in the country. And to kind of give you an idea of how that premium works, let's say that tax lien starts at $1,000. Well, in a year's worth of interest at 15%, we would essentially, earn $150. Well, when you're bidding, you're starting at 1,000. How much of that 150 are of the interest that you may win over that year are you willing to bid? Usually when we're doing these kind of auctions, we like to try to keep it to about 1 to 2 months, where the first month or 2 months, we're not going to really earn anything because we've already eaten our premium into it. But then after that time frame, that's where we would start earning interest. But if you suddenly, paid $150 on that tax lien, over the 1,000 amount, so you paid 1,150, then suddenly you would lose all of your interest in that year on that tax lien certificate. And if it redeemed any time earlier than that, then you would just be losing that much more money.
Yeah, which is definitely not what we want to do here. Now, let's take a look at some of the liens that are coming up in this auction. So we can do that by clicking on the preview items for sale here, and from here it tells us the tax year. So you see these are all for 2022 tax year, and then we can see the face amount here, and we can click on that to learn more information about the property. And so We've got a variety of different types of property here. I'm sure they're represented. We have things like, let's click on it. So $7,000 lien, and let's see what it is. So $7,000 lien against, oh, it's commercial property here.
And you can see, it's showing a value of, what is that, 258 plus 71?
Yeah, yeah, it's weird how it's split up like that. Oh, appraised and assessed value, I see. So one of them is the appraised value is a 258. The assessed value is the one that's down below that. And so they're giving it a value there of 258. We can see the address here of the property.
Yeah,
And
you can also click on that photo and it'll pull up a photo.
oh, I thought I could go a little bigger than that here. There you can see the image of it. And like we're saying, it looks like it's a commercial property. And so, yeah, the $250,000 value on it is probably well, we could say that we could just treat that like that's a value, but it's probably lower than than what the actual value on the property is. But again, it's only a $7,000 lien, so your money is highly secure with a property like this, and we could look into it a little bit more, and figure out more information here about the property, depending on how long we want to look into it.
Yeah, well, with any tax lien that we're seriously going to buy, we're going to do a little bit more due diligence. If you guys have listened to our trainings about the first 6 steps of due diligence or research, that's kind of what we're going to be doing with the tax lien certificate, getting an idea of the location, seeing what we can see with any type of satellite view, any type of street view on the property, and also look for any type, especially with a structured property, any type of serious damage, whether we can see that through a satellite view or a street view that would keep us from investing in the tax lien certificate. But overall, this really looks pretty good, and it looks like the photo is within this last year.
Yeah, yeah, the photo is very new. It's released from January of 2023, and so not that old of a photo. It looks like the business was operating at the time, and the building itself actually looks like it's in decent shape. We can see it's got some big rooftop units there, probably big AC units, or it could be something for ventilation, but probably the AC units, I'm guessing.
It says something about custom creation, so it could be, a vent system if they're doing any type of painting or something, but I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, it does say automotive refinishes, custom and exotic paints.
Well, and chances are this tax lien will, be paid off and you'll earn your interest rate on it. But we have seen some pretty awesome properties end up picking up through tax lien certificate auctions in Colorado.
Yeah, here's one for 5,000, $5,000 lien. Uh, Looks like this one's actually against well, let's take a look and see. Is it commercial? Oh,
I can't tell if that's apartments with the U-Haul. I think it might be an apartment building.
yeah, I think so too. Let's see.
There's that aerial right there.
Yeah, let me see if I can.
I was having kind of issues with one of them earlier.
There we go. Got to click over here. And oh yeah, it does. It looks like it's all of those things that we were looking at there in the image, those apartments. Look,
Yeah, it's probably an eightplex, I would think.
yeah, yeah, that
It
makes
could be a
sense.
sixplex.
Well, for $5,000, your money is highly secure because again, this is like $1 million property at least. The appraised value for 2023 is 900,000, and so yeah, probably at least $1 million property, and only $5,000 for the tax lien itself. That's like it's a tiny fraction of what this property is estimated to be worth.
Well, and this record shows us some information as well. I mean, we can get as we're looking at this, we're going to look and see, is it an owner occupied property? Well, this one looks like it's owned through some type of company. And also in looking at the address, we'll see, is it an out-of-state investor? And as we get into a tax deed investor, that's really where we can find out some additional information by looking in the deed. Scroll down a little further. I just want to see if it says any. I want to see if it has some of the building information. It just shows the square footage. I was hoping to see if it was built in 1980, so it's fairly new.
Yeah, yeah, it is relatively new here. Apartment low rise, 1 to 3. So there's 10 bedrooms.
It's probably 5 apartments.
Yeah, yeah,
5 2-bedroom, 1 bath.
yeah, yeah. That makes sense. Your money's highly secure, and really there are all kinds of investments here. Whether you want to spend a fairly small amount, on something. I mean, let's see, $1,100 here. Let's take a look at this. For $1,100, this is like a $500,000 property. It's crazy. Yeah, that's a home. So your $1,100 tax lien is against a single family home, and that's valued at 455,000. It's estimating here. So that's an incredible level of security there to it. That the lien to value ratio is off the charts. Where you have the lien represents such a tiny percentage of the property's value. Um, on the flip side of that, you can also look and it's interesting how the numbers work out. Like that was probably a $500,000 property. Here we have a $43,000 lien. And if we look at this one, this property is appraised value 1.86 million. So almost $2 million. And if we look at it, oh, that's funny. Let's see what this is, because
That
that
was
looks,
not what I was expecting.
no, and it's not what shows up here on the site address here. I'll show you here. Okay, so we can see the overhead image of it here, and it's this square, this rectangle right here. And if we go down there to the street level, it's actually this building right here, which it's like a behavioral health care place,
Yeah, well,
currently.
and where we could double check that as well is just to check the county map and make sure that it matches up with what we're looking at as far as the address is concerned. Because that photo, I'm thinking that photo, we'd have to see what year this was built, but I'm thinking this is probably pretty new, and that photo may have been what was it on the property before that new building was built.
Yeah, that's probably true. It probably that probably was what it looked like before they did this. Yeah, there we go. There was where we can see. So that is our property right there.
Yep, it matches up completely. So I would think that photo was from before this was taken. Scroll down a little farther on the record and see if we can see when this property was built. Oh, 1979. Maybe not then. I don't know why they have the wrong photo.
Yeah, it could just be just an accident there, or they just have the wrong one. But yeah, you can see how in both cases though, whether you've got $1,000 lien on a property that's worth nearly 500,000, or you have a $45,000 lien on a property that's valued at over 2 million. In both cases, the money is highly secure, and in both cases, there's a very high chance that the lien is just going to redeem, because that's usually what happens, especially with valuable properties like these. They rarely are going to get lost to foreclosure because of the taxes alone.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and one strategy that we'll look at as well as we're looking through a list like this is, is some of these properties are going to be nicer and they're going to probably be more aggressive in their bidding. Sometimes you can look at these 700, 500, $1,000 liens that are essentially on a good valuable piece of land where you can maybe earn a higher interest rate, and you're also going to have a better chance of maybe actually acquiring the property. In fact, we had one of our students who acquired a really nice mobile home on 5 acres through a taxing certificate in Colorado just recently. So there, you can acquire property, but it's really going to be more of a numbers game.
Oh, this one might be landlocked.
I thought it might be, but I think that the street on the left hand side.
That counts as official access, that little
Oh,
chunk.
well, yeah, I see what you're saying. There's kind of that lot right in front of the road as well.
Yeah,
That's where we'd have to check and see, looking at that deed on the other property and also the deed on this property, and see, is there any type of easement that would allow you to access the property through that lot that's in front of it. So if you're looking at the map, you can see that lot with the two cars there to the left-hand side of it. That's where we would be concerned about having legal access, because it looks like there's a vacant lot between it.
yeah,
From overhead, it looked like it was kind of a little bit on the rough side.
yeah. It did look a little bit rough. Interesting. Let's see what some of these are. This one was a big one too. This was like an $80,000 lien, and in this case, it is storage warehouse. This is going to be even bigger. I think this is worth like $5 million. Let's see what this is. It's some kind of big. Oh, it looks like was it being constructed at the time?
I couldn't tell if that was the construction or if it was some type of like futuristic, design or something.
Well, let's just go take a look at it. It might be easier. Oh, okay. So, mm, yeah, it's this place called Gen 3 Construction. Oh, it's this. It's more than. It all looked like one building, didn't it?
Flip around. It's that one.
Oh, there we go. Okay, that makes sense. It has been, I mean, that looks like a pretty new construction. Or if not new, for building the whole thing, it's been refurbished or updated recently.
I think that's what the picture was. As I think this is probably an older building. We can look at the year, but I'm gonna bet it's older than that. I think it's been redone. Yeah, see, it's built in 1970. So I think that within the last couple of years, this has been completely, rehauled.
Yeah, it sold for $3 million in 2017.
Yeah, probably after that time between when it got purchased and now. When was that photo on Google taken? In fact, that's one thing we can
Uh,
point out.
July of 2022.
Yeah, most of you probably know, but down there in the bottom right-hand corner, you can see whenever the street view was taken. So that'll at least give us an idea of when the photo was taken.
Yeah, which, yeah, you can see, that is a very nice setup there, big building, and all of it has been updated there.
That's a long building.
Yeah, it really is. It really is quite long.
Yeah, it's big.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting how all of these, I mean, every single one of these so far has been, I think, uh, I wouldn't hesitate so far to, I think, to bid on any of these. Even the one we saw for $700 or so was not that bad.
Well, and chances are you're going to get paid off, and also the value of that property was quite high,
Yeah,
just because everything, in this area of Colorado is valued high. Even a
yeah,
little house like this.
Yeah, even a little house like this is valued very high. You know, it was maybe a $2,000 lien, but valued at almost 500,000. So, yeah, all of these liens I think are going to offer that same kind of investment security where, uh, you know, eh, from an investment perspective, they're going to make sense as long as you don't invest too much, like we said, into that premium. You know, I think the investment's going to make sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and we're looking here within a nicer county within Colorado where the property values are going to be a little bit higher. But you can see that, this is just one page of 39 pages. So there's going to be a lot of taxing certificates. Sometimes we'll go ahead and start researching them depending on cost. So, if you had a budget that you were looking to invest, then what we'd probably recommend doing is looking, and separating them by cost. So you can click at the top and it'll do it from the highest or the most expensive to the lowest, and then kind of figure out from there which tax liens fit within your investment bracket, and then also, from there, picking out some tax liens that you'd actually like to set up and bid on.
Look at that. That's another big apartment complex that was probably purchased there. Yeah, it is a big apartment built in, yeah, 2022, brand new, just still in the process there of being constructed.
So hopefully that gives you guys kind of a better idea of how Colorado works with their online auctions. In addition to real auction, they also have some being held on Zeus auctions, and so there's some different auctions taking place online. That if you're interested, go ahead and get signed up and participate in bidding. Even if you don't win it, if you haven't done it before, it's going to be worth putting in a deposit. You just need to put down 10% of what you're looking to invest. And if you don't win anything, you're going to get your deposit back. But at least you've gone through that effort. Me and Shade had to attend several different auctions before we actually won a property when we first got started 20 plus years ago. So you need to kind of get some practice in. Maybe you'll win something there at the first time. But I guess what I'm saying is participating in auctions is what's going to give you the opportunity to pick up those good deals that we see happen every day.
Yeah, yeah, it's like giving yourself at bats. You know, you've got to give yourself the chance to swing there, and the only way you're going to do that is if you are participating in auctions. Yeah, for the next section we're going to cover here, we like to cover what were they thinking section sometimes, where we look at different property deals or properties that we think were maybe were either people paid too much or properties they shouldn't have gone after in the first place, probably.
Yeah, just kind of bad deals reviewed, where we look at a couple of properties. And what we looked at today earlier, or what we talked about earlier today, was properties that are unusable. Properties that don't have the right size and aren't buildable properties. And these people didn't lose, millions of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars, but each one of these deals don't have any use. We don't understand why people bid at the auction, and to bid it up to $3,600 or to $5,100, you need at least two people to be able to bid it up to that price. And so, these are some examples of property. I mean, the one on the left, you could say, well, it's on a paper road, maybe that'll eventually get built, but it doesn't have a huge value attached to it either. So when looking at the property, it's not accessible, but what does that value say? It's, has an SEV of $300, so $600 value, and they spent $5,100 on it.
Yeah, yeah, these ones are absolutely crazy because, you know, in both cases, the properties are obviously not usable, you know, for any real purpose. You know, they're not accessible, you know, by any realistic means. You know, they're both tiny properties too to begin with, but you know, they started off with low opening bid amounts of maybe $400. If you picked up a property like that for $400, at least you're only losing $400. But they didn't. They kept bidding them up, and they until they bid up like $3,600 and $5,100, which is a lot of money to pay for a piece of garbage. You know, I mean, that property, that's way more than that property could ever sell for if you tried to list that property on the market on your own. nobody's going to pay $5,000 for that little landlocked piece of property. So it's purely the auction emotions and people just getting in and trying to win a property before they really know what it is, because that's way over, the market value of a useless property.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, if we're looking at that one there on the left, that's a small strip of land. I don't know what it is, maybe 10 or 15 feet wide by maybe 150 feet, if that. And we can see it's directly behind the home. So there's absolutely no use that you can do it. I mean, the only possible use may be that property owner, and they may have been the one to let it go to auction because it doesn't have any use. So you completely limited your potential buyer pool as nobody. With both of these lots, essentially, they've kind of given their money away. And we don't like seeing this happen, but we see it happen all the times, on properties that with just even some common sense or a little bit of due diligence, we're gonna know that we need to walk away from. But to bid up and to lose $3,600 or $5,100, is kind of sad to us because just the fact that you guys are on watching the call is probably going to keep you from this group.
Well, yeah, I can just guarantee that whoever these people are, they couldn't afford to lose that money. That was probably true. They couldn't afford to really lose it. And so yeah, we hate to see anybody lose money when we know they really probably couldn't afford to do that. Now, let's jump
You know,
over.
no, that's just a good point. Because if they were a true investor, they would have realized that those weren't investor properties.
Hmm.
They're getting caught up in hearing about tax sale investing and just going and bidding on properties without doing some research and doing some education first.
Yeah, and it's just that easy to make a mistake. Now, here's a member deal. Some properties here that were purchased recently by our members, and yeah, we like to highlight those as well.
Yeah, absolutely. These are actually, we're going to look at a few properties here. These are just some of the properties that he picked up this year. So, the property on the bottom was a home that was picked up by Carl for about 35,000. Has a market value of about 100,000, 102,000, but will rent out for just under $1,200 a month. So, in this property, the condition on it was pretty good, and overall was a pretty good deal for him.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, what he paid there. I mean, to have a usable home, which I think it was occupied as well. So to have a usable home, for 25,000 or 35,000 is excellent. It's just hard to go wrong like that.
Yeah, that other home he picked up for what was that, 24,000?
Yeah, one of them 24 and one of them 34, I think.
Yeah, and so both of those can bring in rental income. Uh, here's an
Oh, oh, sorry, bumped. There you go.
here's another property that he picked up, for 35 grand. And one thing that was interesting, this one doesn't have as high a market value, but it had interior photos that we could get a real good idea of what the condition was with the inside. Plus, it also rents for a high amount. So it rents for about $1,400 a month. So in this kind of property, because the condition was better, because he knew what the condition was, and there wasn't that guessing game, was willing to pay a little bit more for the property because the long end goal is to rent the property and use it as a rental income.
Yeah, this property was an awesome purchase because this one had been completely rehabbed, on the inside, and so most everything inside was brand new electrical and stuff that had been done, and there was other things that were brand new on the property. I mean, it was just basically it was ready to use right now. We wouldn't really need anything else except for a cleaning.
Yeah, well, and there's just a couple of states, New York and Michigan, where they'll provide interior photos on some of the properties. And so that can give us a lot better idea of really judging that condition. That's the biggest risk with structured property. We talked about a big risk with land earlier. The big risk with structured property is that, we don't have a crystal ball. We can't, in a lot of cases, see what the interior condition looks like. And so when we can, that's where we can really figure out the numbers better on what the rehab is needed. In this case, there was very little needed because it had some photos taken from the inside.
Yeah, yeah. And again, this was these were just a couple of many homes that he bought there over a course of just a few months, really. So yeah, congratulations to Carl on that. That's awesome. Now, if also, I would know a lot of you watch our videos. If you haven't joined the membership program on taxsalesupport.com, that's something we would like to encourage everybody to do. That's an inexpensive way that you can participate and join and get access to lists and also access to training.
Yeah, we really have tried to make our membership program the best value in tax sale education. So as a member, you're going to get access to our weekly live webinars, all of our tax sale list. You guys saw as we went on the website earlier today and we're able to pull up any of the online auctions that are happening. We could have done that from the auction calendar as well. And we also have just, over the last year have built this new website. So we're going to be adding new tools to it. It's got so many tools to it. You could spend all day going through it and reviewing all of the different membership training and lists that are available.
Yeah, now let's see here. For our last section here, let's go with some questions answered from our YouTube subscribers. So let's take a look at a few of these. First, what happens when a company buys a tax certificate and then a person other than the owner pays off the lien? Do they have the same rights as the successful bidder to acquire the deed um, after 2 years?
Exactly.
So when a company buys a tax certificate, so normally, at least when you're saying a company buys, so whoever buys a tax certificate, it's just the buyer, the investor, you could say. And so when they buy that lien, um, they may not know who exactly is paying off the taxes or paying off the lien. All they know is that the lien suddenly redeems. So their money, suddenly they get their initial investment back plus the interest that they earned or that accrued up to that point. Now, whether it's the property owner, that's paying that off, or whether it was like a mortgage company that's paying that off, or whoever it is that may pay that off, it doesn't matter, because when it gets paid off, basically when the taxes get paid off is when when the lien redeems, and you don't have to worry about anybody else stepping in or somehow losing that right, because the lien gives you foreclosure rights if somehow the redemption period expires and the lien hasn't redeemed yet. And so you're the only person that will have those foreclosure rights on the property. Only lien holders are going to have those foreclosure rights. And that's only if that redemption period expires. And so most of the time, though, you can just sit back and liens end up redeeming because people end up paying off their delinquent tax bills.
Yeah, exactly. So in this case, if anyone else would have paid it off, whether that be the mortgage company, whether that be a family member, they're not going to have any right. They're just essentially paying the taxes off. In fact, we've seen people or have heard of people that have just went online and they think that they're buying a lien, but they're actually just paying that person's property taxes. So it's only the lien holder that has that foreclosure right that, like Shay talked about. And so if you were to go pay off anyone's liens, or if then really you wouldn't have any right. It would just be that their taxes would be paid off.
Yeah, that is something that we've seen happen there in many cases. Okay, so the next question here. If you're looking to buy tax liens to acquire property, would it make sense to get the ones with a lot of existing unpaid tax liens because it increases the chances of the owner not redeeming the lien and the investor getting the property? So there is some logic to that, at least in terms of signs and things that you can look for that will increase the chances, that the property will go to foreclosure. But additional tax liens are not necessary. I mean, So I guess I should back up. If we were looking at an over-the-counter list of properties and we were looking at stuff we might be able to foreclose on, then we might look and see how many tax liens, are against that property. We might be able to spot properties that were eligible to be foreclosed on. And so in some ways, yeah, we could pick out properties maybe based on the number of liens they have. But in most cases, though, we're not really looking at that, or at least we're not necessarily interested also in the properties that have lots of liens against them. At least lots of liens are not the key, unless they're liens that are redeeming. Otherwise we're just talking about lots of roll up. And there's some liens out there that have so much roll up that they're upside down, meaning that there's more owed in roll up than there is in the property value. And so those are the ones that we want to avoid because they're useless land.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Like Shay talked about, it's really going to be the roll up that's going to be key. So we can look at those back taxes, but we're going to want to determine how much the total back taxes are versus the property's value. So we may be looking at a tax lien. Let's say it's a $500 lien on a $10,000 lot. Well, let's say that there's 7 other liens, or we were looking at Colorado earlier in the training. They had 15 years worth of back taxes. Well, that 15 years worth of back taxes could be more than the actual property value. So that's an important thing to look at. It does give us an indication. And in a certain states that we'll focus on that, we'll look for that and we'll know that, okay, there's, a few years there, we can go ahead and start the foreclosure process earlier. And that will increase our chances of acquiring property focusing on those liens. But we do need to be worried about the roll up like Shay talked about, because that could end up, costing us if we don't figure out what that total amount would be.
Next question here is, so when do you foreclose on a tax lien if there are 10 years of tax liens that haven't been paid and was bought at the over-the-counter? Do you wait for 3 years per Arizona law if they haven't paid taxes in 10 to 13 years? Okay, a little bit of confusion there. So when you buy a tax lien, you're going to foreclose when your redemption period expires if that lien hasn't redeemed yet. Okay, so in other words, if the lien has a 3-year redemption period and the lien hasn't redeemed and that 3-year period expires, then that's when you will initiate and start foreclosing on the property. Now, if you can foreclose on it, if there are 10 years of tax liens that haven't been paid on it, like you're saying here, then what would happen is when we went to go and foreclose, the county would say, great, here, you can foreclose, but here is the tax bill to foreclose. And it may be some humongous amount, we weren't planning on, and that's because it includes 10 years worth of delinquent taxes, yeah, with it. That's what we call huge roll up. That's what we most likely is going to be probably some kind of a toxic property, or at least has so much owed in taxes because of all of these unpaid tax liens that have existed against the property. So normally we foreclose as soon as we can when the redemption period's expired. And yeah, normally other liens are not an issue, or at least when we go to foreclose, you would have to pay those off in order to foreclose. So that's part of what we would call the roll up.
Yeah, well, and if you're looking at a tax lien certificate, it's the redemption period is going to start on the day of the sale. So if we're looking at a tax lien that's 4 years old and the redemption period is 3 years, then yes, we could go ahead and buy that 4-year-old tax lien certificate and start the redemption period in a lot shorter process than waiting out because it's already 4 years old. But like Shay talked about, if we're buying a tax lien that's 4 years old, and there could be 10 to 13 years worth of other tax liens, we've got to take those other tax liens into account, because if we're going to foreclose on the property, we're going to have to pay off that other 10 years worth of tax liens. And so that's where, like Shay talked about, the roll up could totally, hurt a deal where you think you're buying a tax lien that could be a good tax lien because you're just judging it off of the price of the tax lien versus the total versus the property value. But if we're looking at that additional roll up, that's where it can suddenly become, a toxic type tax lien. And so, yes, you can start the foreclosure process in a lot of states if you're buying it already into the redemption period. But if there's additional tax liens on it, that's also a red flag that we're going to have to watch for.
All right, then last question here. How do I find tax liens that are already at the end of their redemption period in Florida when real auction holds most of the tax lien events? Okay, so there's a couple of problems here with the question, or at least a little bit of misunderstanding. First off, so Florida doesn't really have over-the-counter tax liens. At least they're not going to have inventory that is going to be stuff that you're going to want to go after and try to foreclose on, at least in a lot of these places. Now, they may have over-the-counter liens. In fact, sometimes you'll see some of these over-the-counter liens in some of the real auction uh, sales. But most of those are underwater, or it's junk land essentially. Now, also the real auction only covers some of the auctions in Florida, some of the lien auctions and some of the deed auctions, but definitely not the majority of either. And so there's additional sales that are happening out there that you can also find. But in Florida, though, you're never going to find liens that are like at the end of their redemption period or past the redemption period. At least you're not going to find those types of liens there in Florida, because everything gets bought up at the auction, or at these sales. And so the only thing that doesn't, are pieces of useless land, and you don't want to buy, liens against useless land, because again, you don't want to acquire it. And so, yeah, I think you may be able to use, kind of going after over-the-counter opportunities in other states, but Florida, it's kind of hard to do that with their liens.
Well, they do have over the counters, but the problem is kind of like Shay talked about, is that the over the counters are going to be picked up fairly quickly after the auction. So there's certain things that you can do. If they are not available online, then we may be able to check there. But usually they're going to sell very, very quickly after the sale, because so many of the sales have moved online. So if you've already got an online auction, then you're not going to have just an on-site auction where you just have the local competition bidding on it. So that is going to reflect the type of inventory. So if we are looking at over-the-counters in Florida, we're going to get those within the first 2 weeks of the over-the-counter list coming up. We're also going to look at counties that aren't putting those lists available online, to be able to just purchase off of real auction or purchase off of the Grant Street Group website. So there's really a small window of time where you can find over-the-counter liens. Otherwise, it's going to be like Shade said, it's mostly going to be junk property.
Yeah. During those couple weeks, there are some deals you can get, and the advantage is, you can make that maximum rate of return because they're over the counter. But after that, you'll quickly find that the only things that are there are liens, yeah, that are underwater, or that, against useless land or properties that don't have any value. And so, yeah, let's see. I think that pretty well covers it for our YouTube questions here, and I think that also covers it for everything we had scheduled or set up to do in this episode of Tax Sale Titans. So, thank you so much for your time, and be sure to join us again here for the next episode.
Yeah, absolutely. We appreciate all you guys watching, and be sure to comment and subscribe. Ask questions, down in the comments, and we'll try to include some of those questions in next week. So we're going to try doing this every single week. And so we want to be able to answer your guys' questions within there. So go ahead and let us know what you think.
Yeah, thanks so much for watching.
Appreciate it.
We'll see you later.